worldwide flood, another deluge to fall on the earth? You can't be ridiculous. The biblical account of the Noahic flood was once viewed by skeptics as mythological. However, archaeological, geological, and even anthropological findings have lent credible support to a global cataclysm, matching the description of the Genesis flood. Over 270 ancient cultures, as we can see from the Babylonians through their Epic of Gilgamesh to the Mayans, retain stories of a massive flood that destroyed almost all life, leaving a remnant saved by divine instruction. And we see that this widespread cultural memory supports but only one notion, and that is of a shared global catastrophe in ancient times. Do you know that there are a lot of geological and fossil evidence, even though debated, which back the Noahic flood? For example, we see in the fossils of marine creatures, which are found on mountain tops, and once again on mountain tops like the Himalayas and the Andes, which indicate that waters once covered these high regions. And if you have been to the Himalayas, you would understand how high these mountains are. Again, sedimentary rock layers containing fossilized marine life blanket vast portions of continents, which are actually far from the ocean. It doesn't end there. Trees which were fossilized upright through layers of sediments can be also seen to indicate rapid burial by massive flooding, not by gradual deposition over several millennia. Finally, there are mass extinction layers, such as those from the late Paleozoic era, which show rapid catastrophic burial of diverse species ranging from several big monstrous animals we have come to know, even some of the dinosaurs. Do you want to know more? Stay with me. The antediluvian world was not ignorant. As we will see, for 120 years, Noah preached impending judgment. People mocked him while nature quietly prepared to explode. Then suddenly, earthquakes and eruptions and rain like never before started being seen. As we read in Genesis 7:11 through 12, the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Similarly, we live in an age of relentless warning. The preaching of the second coming has intensified since the late 18th century, and we see this clearly crafted in Revelations 14:6 through 7. Yet many remain indifferent or scornful. You might be wondering, how did we land here? Remember, we are still looking at images, symbols, and allusions, especially in the light of biblical prophecy. And by this, we are trying to understand how possible and probable it is for this world to get destroyed, even alluding to old events, especially in the Old Testament. And that is why we began by looking at the antediluvian world, the world of Noah, where, as unexpected as before, the flood took the world by storm. When Jesus appears, the earth again will reel, and we see this in a miniature format as captured in Revelation 6:14 through 16. Every mountain and island was moved out of its place, and the kings of the earth said, "Hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne." Perfectly, the shaking of the antediluvian world prefigures the shaking of our own, a world on edge geologically, morally, and even spiritually. It will interest you to know that what I started with is not only the account accounts that support the flood. We can also discuss the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. Even though people call it a hypothesis, we stand to see the veracity of that finding. In the 1990s, oceanographers William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed that a catastrophic flood around 5600 BCE transformed the freshwater Black Sea into the saltwater body we see it to be today. The event triggered by rising Mediterranean waters, breaking through submerged human settlements, and this is an event possibly remembered in the flood legends of the ancient Near East. The question is, could they be right? Well, we can only prove that as we move along in our discussion. The closing of the door of grace. Do you know that Noah did not close the ark's door? Well, maybe you have not taken time to note that, but in actual sense, Noah never did close the door of the ark. God did. And you can verify according to the account of Genesis 7 verse 16. And what is most fascinating is that the last appeal was made, though the skies were very clear, not showing any signs of rain for 7 days. Judgment had been sealed. Today, prophetic signs unfold globally. Moral collapse, there are wars, climate extremes, spiritual apathy, and it appears that the Creator is calling people into the ark of salvation. But soon the door will shut again, and grace will end. As it was then, so now many will mock and ignore until it is too late, as we see in Luke 17, 26 and 27. What history repeats has always been an evidence and inspiration for those who wait and trust in the Lord. The end comes for the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah as well. I have highlighted to you what happened in the time of Noah, but it appears there are more still examples we need to glean information from while we roller coaster through history. What was the reason for the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? It is clearly defined that where Noah's age represents disbelief, Lot's day reflects moral decay. The sins of Sodom were pride, fullness of food, idleness, injustice, and perversion, and that perfectly mirrors today's society. Yet they were not destroyed without warning. Wickedness now is not hidden in shadows. We see day in, day out. They parade in streets and media. Good is called evil, and evil has become normalized. Consciences of people are seared, even amongst believers. It is no surprise that this generation needs voices like Nathan, who said to David, "You are the man," but also reminded him that God has extended mercy, as we see in 2 Samuel 12 verse 13. But one thing we need to know, there was always judgment before destruction. Before judgment fell, God personally investigated Sodom's state. He included Abraham in the process, reminding us, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? Divine justice, as we see, is always transparent. The judgment was not merely for Sodom. It was a trial of God's own righteousness. Likewise, we too will one day review God's justice over the millennium, as we see in Revelations 20 verse 4. And He invites us to see His ways are just and true. But before we move on, it is noteworthy that I take you through other important parallels, which indeed consolidate the fact that there are examples for us, especially to us unto whom the end of the world is come. We have but examples which ascertain that it is easier than possible for all these catastrophes to happen again, as was disclosed in Revelation 6, verse 12 to 14. Let me give you practical examples in the timeline of history, and I would want you to note the parallels. There was a cataclysmic natural disaster. Oh no, there are actually several of them in history. The earth has witnessed disasters of staggering scale, and they serve as real-time reminders of our planet's volatility and the biblical warnings of coming judgment. Do you ever recall, or probably you are young, have you ever read of Mount Vesuvius? In 79 AD, it actually destroyed the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum in a single day. Again, we see in history the happening of the Lisbon Earthquake in 1755, and it actually is one of Europe's deadliest, which included fire and tsunami at the same time, shaking people's confidence in science and religion alike. It doesn't end there. Another example of a worldwide catastrophe happening in diverse places is the Indonesian Krakatoa Eruption in 1883. This created massive tsunamis and darkened global skies for months, reducing temperatures worldwide. More popularly is the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004. It is recorded that over 230,000 lives were lost across 14 countries just by a tsunami. You can also talk of the Tohoku Earthquake and Tsunami in 2011. It didn't only devastate Japan, but it resulted in the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Friends, these disasters reveal that entire societies can be suddenly overturned, and they actually echo Jesus' warning in Matthew 24, 38 through 39. For us in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Now let me dive in the final embers of this discourse. The end of our world is coming, but as it has always been, the judgment before the close of grace. Daniel, in the context of prophecy, saw thrones set up and Ancient of Days presiding over a courtroom. You can find this in Daniel 7, verse 9 through 10. The judgment is real, as it happens in heaven while the world goes about its usual business. But we see in that event, in the vision, Jesus is awarded an everlasting kingdom, and this moment precedes the second coming. Now, remember the parallels. In the Noahic flood, in the destruction of Sodom, there was always a preceding sign and a preceding characteristic which pointed to destruction. The investigative judgment came before destruction, and that is the same thing we are expecting in the end. The investigative judgment comes before destruction, not after. God does not need judgment to know who is saved, but it is the angels, it is the universe, and we ourselves need the clarity and assurance of divine fairness. Before Christ returns, the door of grace will close, just like it did in Noah's day. Those inside the ark, which is Christ, will be safe. The rest will face a judgment they ignored, though the signs were all around. It is clear that we are the generation upon whom the ends of the ages have come. The flood and the fire are not merely stories of old. They are prophetic patterns for what is soon to come. History, science and prophecy align to declare the end is real. The warnings are clear, and the choice is now. Will you be in the ark when the heavens break open.